Welcome. My name is Whitney, and I am your Oprah for the community track, as I like to say. And so I'm going to be introducing each of our speakers and our panels, and then here in the room to help facilitate question and answer. So the first speaker we have today, which is our keynote for this track, is actually a little different from the program. So we had this lovely gentleman's boss scheduled to come, and he is ill and is unable to make it. But I secretly don't tell him. I'm glad that Alberto is here, because typically when there's a boss and then the person who's actually making the stuff happen, yeah. Alberto, so don't tell Antonio I said this, but Alberto has as much knowledge as Antonio does, and even more insight into the work. So I'm really excited to have him. So Alberto Avalos is currently the Innovation and Technology Program Manager at Hispanic Heritage Foundation. And the focus of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation in the area that we most connect into is Code as a Second Language, which is a nationwide initiative focused at computer science and introducing youth to computer programming to really increase the pool of Latino and Latina entrepreneurs and engineers and software engineers around the country. So Alberto will be speaking. We will then do a question and answer period. I'll give you like a 2-minute warning for when you're there. And when we do Q&A, please wait till I get you the microphone, because that way you'll be recorded on the video. So that we can hear what you say. So I'll run around and get that to you. Okay, thank you. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much. As she mentioned, my name is Alberto Avalos. I'm the Innovation Technology Program Manager at the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. I hope you didn't record the part where she said about Antonio that I'm much better than him. So, yeah. Thank you very much again. There you go. Thank you again to everyone here for joining us this morning. Thank you to the Infosys Foundation USA for inviting us back to CrossRoads. And excuse me if I look down at my notes here. Antonio wrote up some pieces that I added to as well. So I'll be looking at some of the pieces he wrote today. We've been proud partners of the Infosys Foundation for the past 3 years, and we always look forward to this important and this very powerful convening every year. You know, it's a very special conference every year where I have the privilege of meeting some of the brightest minds and some of the most passionate people who are looking to make an impact in our community. And they've really outdone themselves. You know, I feel like when I woke up, the sun was shining, the birds were chirping. It's kind of something that you don't, kind of read about. And coming from Los Angeles, you kind of hear the vroom, vroom that wakes you up every morning, So it's kind of a change here today. So it's a pleasure to join you all today in discussing how really CS education can help build stronger communities, a stronger workforce, and a better world that really should bring us together instead of pushing us apart. Like-minded people from across the country and the world have really come together to ensure that every child has an opportunity to solve problems, build connections between us through powerful ideas, and that are brought to life through technology. This is the spirit behind our Code as a Second Language, or CSL initiative, that has taught thousands of K-12 students on how to code across the country, including Puerto Rico. Our Code as a Second Language initiative actually started in my hometown in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles on the east side about 4 years ago, really as a volunteer effort. And since then, we've been fortunate enough to continue to scale it to now over 38 cities across 55 schools across the country, and even taking it to Puerto Rico. And so we've expanded from what was, day-long coding boot camps to really year-long academies that we really can't keep up with the demand. Earlier this month, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, teaching over 200 Latino and Latina high school students on how to code in an effort to build really an organic pipeline from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, to the dozen or so Fortune 500 companies trying to fill technology jobs. I had no idea in Omaha, Nebraska, that I would find that big of a Latino-Latina community in that actual, neighborhood. And so what we're realizing is, there's more and more communities across the country that continue to have burgeoning communities of color, and that really need more, that we really need to focus on more, because I think a lot of the focus often goes to, your Los Angeles, your New York, your Chicago's, but Omaha, Nebraska, Lehigh, Utah. We've been in all of those places because of the importance of making sure that our community has access no matter where you are. Our motto at the Hispanic Heritage Foundation is that really anything that you can imagine can be real. And coding and technology allows that transition from technology to reality. We want to make sure that all children have the opportunity, including immigrant youth who may not even know English yet, but can be a very valuable resource for America as we continue to address our workforce tech gaps, where currently between 500 and 1 million tech jobs are vacant. For example, in Washington, D.C., we were in front of a group of very quiet middle school students at Springbrook High School who were there for our CSL program. Interestingly, they were all English language learners or ESL students, and fortunately our instructors are mostly bilingual college students. After completing our CSL Academy, our surveys were littered with comments that learning coding was much easier than actually learning English. And the great part was that they were learning both code and English at the same time. Think about it, there over there, or something further or farther. Or how about the classic rule, I before E except after C, except that rule has even more exceptions. Computer science either makes sense or it doesn't. It's kind of like Spanish. But in all seriousness, think about that juxtaposition of a classroom of 50 Latino-Latina students who some identify as undocumented or documented, who are eager to learn a code, but are a short drive from an environment in Washington that wants to deport them, only to actually need them to fill jobs that can't be filled in the present or the near future. On Thursday, you're going to hear from our very own Sofia Sanchez-Mais, who developed an innovative process to convert algae from the Rio Grande River into a biofuel before graduating high school, and was coding for the Mars rover as well. She's now working for NASA while finishing up her sophomore year, I believe sophomore junior year at Yale. However, during Sofia's acceptance speech in receiving the prestigious Jefferson Award that everyone from Cesar Chavez to Thurgood Marshall to Justice Sonia Sotomayor has received, she stated that although she focuses on answering questions about the universe, the biggest question she can't figure out is how we got to where we are here on Earth. That's a big question. How did we get to this place? A place where the other is ostracized or villainized, and the other includes most of the people at this conference in one way or another. And the other includes the young people we're trying to empower through technology and coding. A famous immigrant who had a tremendous impact as a scientist on the United States and the world once said, "The world's a dangerous place to live, not simply because of the people who have evil intentions, but because of the people who don't do anything about it." And that's why many of us are here today, to do something about it, through providing access to technology. And that's the biggest, and that's the bigger picture. It's not just social mobility or the workforce, it's providing all children the tools or the skills and the confidence to problem solve, create, innovate, mobilize, and inspire. Or like the young people we challenge to develop an app or a video game to address social issues every year. Hundreds of underrepresented students to create actual games or apps that we support through our Loft Labs to continue to make a social impact through technology. There is no end to the supply of talent, and we can access if we provide them with the access. It's remarkable what they can come up with, and it all starts with computer science. That's how idea is activated. Our president and CEO always says, a 15-year-old with a laptop and Wi-Fi can actually reach more people with a few clicks of a keyboard than Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Cesar Chavez could in their iconic lifetimes combined. That's truly unlimited potential. And we're all here at CrossRoads to ensure that all children have that potential. Technology is like a superpower that serves our communities across the world and our needs in a multitude of ways. It's not as simple as preparing underrepresented students to be CS majors in a university and for careers in software engineering or tech fields. It's much bigger than that. It's about students developing an important base of knowledge, confidence, and skills that they'll need to take on the rapidly changing and challenging world that is more like a small town because of increased access to technology. Our students need to think critically, problem solve, and work closely with others without losing their sense of empathy, which will be the only thing distinguishing them from very efficient robots that will be working side by side sooner than later, thanks to artificial intelligence advancements. But research from a Google Gallup partnership showed only 50% of Latino students and 58% of African American students said they use a computer most days at home, compared with 68% of white students. The research also found that students who use computers less at home are less confident in their ability to learn computer science. In fact, Black and Hispanic students are more likely than their white peers to be interested in learning computer science, with Latinos being at 1.7 times more interested and African Americans being 1.5 more interested than white students. Girls were less likely than boys to report being told by parents or teachers that they would be good at computer science, 39% versus 56%. And were less likely than boys to be aware of computer science learning opportunities outside of school. Think about this. What would our world look like if only a fraction of Latino, African American, and women knew how to write? You wouldn't have a Gabriel Garcia Marquez or an Isabel Allende. You wouldn't have a Langston Hughes or a Maya Angelou. You wouldn't have a Jane Austen or a J.K. Rowling. Our world would have a huge void, culturally, intellectually, a missing voice or a perspective, if you will. That's what's happening right now in underrepresented communities that don't know how to code or learn computer science. We'll have to continue to have we will continue to have a tremendous void, except not in literature, but in actual innovation, which has and can change our life every single day. You know, what great innovations are we currently missing out on or will be missing? You know, think about the great innovations that we benefited from in the past. You know, an African-American physician was responsible for the first blood banks. An African-American created one of the first clocks. A Latino invented the color TV. A Latino invented the artificial heart. A Latino invented the ballpoint pen. And let's not forget squeezing a lime into a cold beer. No? That was Antonio's line, by the way. The last census project projects that minorities will be the majority in the United States in just 20 years. It's already happening in my home state of California. Actually, Latinos have outnumbered whites in California for the past 3 years. So you see, we really have no choice but to invest in underrepresented communities to move the innovation economy and America forward. There's a tangible tie between the access to technology and to innovation, and ultimately the national economic prosperity. For example, a study of 120 nations between 1980 and 2006 estimated that each 10% point increase in broadband penetration added 1.3% chance to a high-income country's gross domestic product and a 1.21% for low to middle-income nations. But what happens when our youth are not connected to the internet or don't have access to a computer or tech device? Before you can learn to code or feel comfortable coding, you need to be connected. At HHF, we called this issue tech equity. Some have called it the homework gap. And if countries are deeming information technology as critical to their infrastructure for further development as a nation, we should look at our communities filled with underrepresented youth the same way. Broadband is actually viewed by actual developing countries as a way to simulate economic development, social connections, and civic engagement. And everything feeds off of that growth. According to Teach America, each tech job supports 3 jobs in other sectors of the economy. And in information technology, they say there are 5 jobs for each IT position. In today's digital landscape, students can't learn as efficaciously without the internet. Going forward into tomorrow, there will only be a bigger gap between what the internet has and the internet have-nots. As the have-nots continue to struggle to keep up, our entire educational system will also struggle to keep up globally and subsequently our workforce. And that's an even bigger problem within the near future. You know, when a young man in our Latinos Are in Fast Track network named Adan Gonzalez was a high school student in the rough and tumble Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas, he had dreams of going to college, being a boxer, and launching a national effort to support disenfranchised youth through education, empowerment, and networking. But first, he needed to get through high school. Then he needed to apply to college and for college grants. The easy part, he laughed, would be actually going to college. At one time, Adan shared a bedroom with 6 others while his father worked long hours as a custodian and his mother held odd jobs to help feed the family. Unlike many other students in America, there was no internet in his apartment complex, and too often no electricity. To complete his homework, requiring online access, he would walk late at night after sports practices outside of a McDonald's or a Starbucks to catch enough of the sporadic Wi-Fi signals to finish his assignments on a borrowed laptop or on his cell phone. When he had to research and apply for colleges, he literally hit the streets in search of a signal that didn't have a password. College grants were accessed the same way, through this maddening process akin to finding water with the divining rod over 100. It's akin to finding water with the divining rod over 100 years ago. Fortunately, Adan was resourceful enough, diligent enough to hurdle over this gap in technology, which traps many other disadvantaged youth. The Hispanic Heritage Foundation conducted a study called Taking the Pulse of the American High School Student, and found that Adan was not alone in his struggle to find internet access, as many of us here know. We found through a national survey of high school students that nearly 60% of students use their smartphone to access the internet, but nearly 80% of Hispanic students who do not have regular access to a computer at home use their smartphones to access the internet. That led to Hispanics being most likely to use a smartphone to complete a homework assignment or a college application. In today's digital landscape, students can't learn as efficaciously without the internet, as I mentioned. And that's a problem because over the next 2 years, more than 75% of all jobs will require some level of digital skills. All jobs, not just in our world of computer science and programming, all jobs. To address this gap, we need to get creative and continue to focus on providing access to broadband and technology, access to coding programs in and out of high school. Invest in teachers, especially computer science teachers, and their great work, including the great work of the Computer Science Teachers Association, who we work with. It will take innovative solutions as well as a collective effort by the private, public, education, and community-based institutions to make it easier for the Adan Gonzalez's of the world to move forward and to essentially move our country forward. As for an update on Adan, he graduated from Georgetown, went to Harvard for grad school on the education track, is teaching at his old middle school right now in his community, and was just accepted to the Columbia University Teaching College. On the side, he's engaged over 10,000 area youth in Dallas through his Puede network, which focuses on leadership, academics, and job skills, which the Hispanic Heritage Foundation actually incubates as an organization. And lastly, we've connected kids to computers and Wi-Fi through our TED Equity initiative, and one of the curriculums is computer science. Finally, thank you to everyone in this room who continues to work tirelessly to make a change in the world that can bring us all together by investing in our vision of young minds like Adan and acknowledging our shared humanity. Imagine the possibilities. Thank you.
And then I have the mic if anyone would like to ask questions. And I'll run it to you.
Hi, my name is Sean Arian, and I run something called the Bixel Exchange. I have a question. I've known Alberto actually for a while, and I have a question on just in terms of like the students and others that go through your program. How many, one of the things we found is a lot of times people focus on this being a supply problem, as opposed to a demand problem. And I was just wondering, after students go through your program, how easy have you found it to place them into a track that gets them a job in technology? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think fundamentally, that's at the basis of a lot of the work we do as an organization, because at the end of the day, really the long-term goal is they need to get jobs. Right? And I think we kind of lose sight of that at times, right? Companies like the headlines of, we taught 20 million kids to code, right? And important, but sometimes that's, a 5 to 10 year plan of hopefully this kid in 8th grade goes to college, majors in computer science, then gets a job in a tech company, which will happen because of the amazing programs that tons of organizations, including ours, we do as well. What we found interesting is that sometimes companies, it's tougher to work with them on the end of the pipeline, right? They're a lot more stringent on, what actual qualifications are needed to get into the job. We always struggle with when we talk with some companies where they say they have to know X, X, and X, and X in these certain ways, and we're like, well, you're basically asking for, 6'7" Latino with green hair, one red eye, and walks on his right foot, or hops 5 times or whatever. They're so specific in their demands when we know that there's so many people within our network that have gone through our programs or that have been part of any of our other programs that can do the job. So what we've done over the course of, I would say now 10, 15 years working with companies like ExxonMobil and Goldman Sachs and PwC and now technology companies is literally kind of working with the systems they've created in a creative way because, ExxonMobil, the way that we've worked with them is pretty interesting. All of the funding that goes to the people we place at ExxonMobil, and we've placed over 250 Latino chemical, civil, or mechanical engineers over the course of 8 years now. And we've done that because the way we've done that is they provide us a grant and we pay out the students through that grant. Because to go through their HR, to go through their, all of their actual contracts, it's such a difficult and bureaucratic process that we've worked outside of that. With Facebook recently, we did a program where they're recruiting specifically HR, where they're working specifically HR or talent acquisition folks with 5 to 8 years experience who are specifically Latino. So we worked through our network and actually found them that specific segment. We're doing something with Walt Disney in Los Angeles on June 6th. We're getting 30 to 40 Latinos with some tech experience to go to their actual headquarters. So all that to say is every company's been different, and we kind of have to literally kind of inch away at each company's process. With Goldman Sachs, they in particular want fill our applicant pool and we'll take care of the rest. PwC is find us exactly what we want, match them up with mentors, and we'll walk them through the rest. So it's a little different each time.
I'm Patty Ordonez from the University of Puerto Rico. Thank you for your work there.
Awesome.
I want to ask about Latinas in particular,
because
I see in the computing world that they're even more harshly criticized. Like they're expected to be much better than the men in order to succeed in that realm. And so I'm wondering what things have you done to try and target Latinas in computing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Some of the greatest, there's a couple of levels to that. One of the greatest things that I've ever learned was actually at one of the CS actually for all with Ruth, CS for all summits is you're learning from others about how to target specific communities with wording, with images, and really leveraging your networks with really leveraging your network of other organizations of how to target a specific community, right? With Latinas in particular, we've actually launched specific computer science programs just for Latinas in different parts of the country, which the curriculum focuses, we're very specific on the language that we use, right? Because often if you say, hey, we're going to build race cars with the coding curriculum, all you're going to get is little boys, So we're very careful about the words that we use and the images we use. And we actually have a number of instructors who are Latinas who end up teaching those specific courses. And through the process, we because we're a national organization, we've been able to identify some of the top Latinas within computing. And there's a literally organization called Latinas in Computing that we've been able to highlight them to those specific communities. So all in all, to say the way we work with that community, with the Latinas in our community is we sort of just connect them to each other and literally build knowledge within each other, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like our thought process around what's the best way to teach Latinos and Latinas to code? Not necessarily getting an older white gentleman who has a computer science degree and putting it in front of him. It's getting someone who maybe grew up in the area, speaks the language, and everything of that sort. So the same to the Latinas, just in a more specific way. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Maggie Malone. I'm from Hartnell College in Salinas, California. What is the age or grade that you consider is the appropriate to start the interest?
Literally out the womb, I would say. No, I'm just kidding. It's funny, you mentioned Hartnell. I mean, Joe Welch is an amazing friend. When he started computer science in 3 and the program out there, he actually went to our first Coder Summit in Stanford University, and we took about, I would probably say 50 kids from Hartnell College up to that conference. So, I would say at a very, as really as young as they can use a mobile phone, right? You see kids who are 2-3 years old literally on their phones already. There's tons of educational games and educational programs on phones that are not exactly coding, but just kind of start stimulating their mind in a specific way. In particular with Hartnell, I think one of the biggest issues there within sort of rural communities is the lack of focus that companies or organizations actually provide or actually funds. I was just talking to a gentleman in the back, and Tulare and Orosi and the Central Valley and King City, they don't get any love, They don't get any love from companies or any of that, or even Omaha, Nebraska. So I think there needs to be a refocus, not just from a company standpoint, but from an organizational standpoint, to figure out how do we support these communities in some of the most impacted areas with the least access to technology, where they're not worried about how do we learn to code, they're worried about, how do we get access to the internet. So yeah, absolutely, I would say at a very young age, as soon as they can pick up a cell phone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So let's give Alberto a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.